You know what's really strange about grief? Part of me knows that my dog just died, but another part of me still keeps expecting him to be here. I find myself listening for him and the sounds that he would make, looking to make sure I'm not stepping on him. I still glance toward the places that I expect him to be laying. I still look to take him outside with my other dog. I still have moments where my brain feels almost confused for a second, like it forgot that reality updated. And honestly, that's been one of the weirdest parts of this whole experience of loss. Because grief is obviously emotional, but I don't think that I've ever realized exactly how neurological it really is. So I started researching what is actually happening in the brain during grief. And the more that I learned, the more I began to realize it's really just your nervous system trying to solve a problem that it can't solve. And I think that's why it can really just be exhausting. I learned that attachment in the brain works a lot like prediction. Your brain is your brain is constantly building models around what is consistently in your life. It's not just emotional, it's physical, routines, even the things in your environment become predictable models to your brain. So my dog wasn't just emotionally important to me. He actually existed in all my daily routines. My nervous system expected him to be in certain places at certain times and making certain sounds. And apparently, when someone or even an animal you deeply are attached to disappears from your daily routine, the brain, it doesn't immediately update this information. Part of the system continues to search, which also explains why grief can be so disorientating. Because consciously, you know they're gone, but unconsciously, the system is still trying to find them. And I really think that's the part of grief that people don't talk about enough. Grief isn't just emotional pain. Your body is actively involved in it. Your stress system activates in response to it. Your nervous system becomes more vigilant. And your brain keeps trying to reconcile. Why are they missing? And what's really wild is that the brain often processes a social loss through some of the same circuitry involved in our physical pain, which honestly, when you think about it, makes sense because grief literally hurts our hearts. And it's not a metaphorical sense. It physically hurts. We feel it. And I think that's why grief can create this strange combination of exhaustion, restlessness, brain fog, emotional overwhelm, and numbness. Sometimes all in the same day. One thing that really stood out to me while I was doing my research was dopamine. Because dopamine is usually talked about like it's pleasure, but it's actually more connected to seeking, motivation, pursuit. and expectation. And grief creates what's basically an incomplete loop. The brain keeps trying to reconnect to something that no longer exists physically anymore. The brain keeps trying to reconnect to something that no longer exists physically. So it keeps searching. And I started realizing that might be part of why distraction feels so good when you're grieving. Feels so good when you're grieving. Scrolling, watching things constantly, staying busy, overworking, eating, even obsessively researching. Why? Because those things create smaller loops that the brain can actually complete. You scroll, you refresh, you finish the task, you get a tiny resolution signal. Meanwhile, grief itself has no immediate resolution. And I think that's why people can end up swinging between feeling everything and trying not to feel anything. I think the hardest part, though, is the space that grief leaves behind. Not just emotional, but structural. There are routines missing now, moments missing, attention missing. I don't really think I realized how much energy attachment actually occupies inside of our nervous systems until there was nowhere else for it to go. And I've been thinking a lot about the idea lately that grief creates unfinished space in the brain. Not because something is wrong with you, but because the system, it had pathways built around this connection. And now those pathways, they suddenly don't know where to go, which is why grief can feel so restless. Your body still has momentum towards something it can no longer reach. And this is the part that just hit me the hardest. Apparently, the brain cannot sustain that level of unresolved seeking forever. Eventually, it has to adapt to that empty space somehow. And from what I understand after my research, there are a few directions that adaptation can actually go. Sometimes people just shut down emotionally. Sometimes they can stay partially stuck in this loop for years. And sometimes very, very slowly, the brain will start to build new pathways, not replacements. I don't think the love we feel ever gets replaced, but the energy that we spent searching eventually becomes available for something else. New routines, new meaning, new forms of connection, and new ways for us to exist. And I think that's probably what healing actually is. Not forgetting, not moving on, just the nervous system no longer expecting them to walk back into the room. I don't really have some perfect inspirational ending for this. I think I'm still inside of it, but understanding the neurological side of grief has honestly helped me feel less broken. Because now when my brain loops or I suddenly feel emotional out of nowhere or I feel just exhausted for no reason, I understand that my system is adapting to his absence. And maybe healing is less about forcing a closure and more about allowing the brain time to slowly reorganize what has changed. Anyway, that's what's been on my mind lately. And if you have experienced grief lately, I'm really sorry for your loss. I'll see you next time. I love y'all. Thank you for supporting me.